Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Wilson, the founder and CEO of Starts at 60, the online home of the Aussie baby boomer. We're starting something new today. We're going to be talking to experts and people who make products that we think are really interesting for you, so you can learn more and find interesting products and solutions that you can include in your life. So today's video is organised by the Starts at 60 Marketplace, our massive and growing online shopping platform just for over 60s. You can take a look at the whole marketplace at startsatsixty.com/marketplace. Now today I'm joined by Charlie Schmidt, the head distiller of Kangaroo Island Spirits, to talk about one of my personal favourite products in the marketplace. It was one we took on last year, very early in the growth of the marketplace, and that is this very, very special Mulberry Gin. I'm absolutely fascinated by this product. I used to climb my grandparents' mulberry tree, Charlie, as a child, and I have these memories of almost rolling around in buckets of mulberries in mulberry season and eating the delicious fruits, but also having to scrub them off my body. And I think this generation has that. So I also like the odd drop of gin. So, I think everybody has a good taste for gin. So I'm fascinated. I think this is a magical product. So I'm looking forward to our audience being able to hear the story behind the gin today. So welcome, Charlie.
Thank you.
So let's dive straight in to learn more about this product, because I think it is, totally cool. I've also, as you can see, had a little taste of it. And so where did the idea of Mulberry Gin come from?
So on Kangaroo Island, we have a mulberry tree that was planted when the island was first settled back in 1836. And the founders of Kangaroo Island Spirits, John and Sarah Lark, who are no longer with the business, but they built the business up, and they were in charge of not only running the business, but also creating the products and distilling them and bottling them themselves. So very in touch with creating their own product. And they were inspired by the mulberry tree on Kangaroo Island down at Reeves Point, just outside of Kingscote. Essentially, it had been here for as long as Kangaroo Island had, and I thought, why not do a gin with the fruit that we have, a strong history with on the island. So that's where it started from. And then they looked at how best to do it, basically. So they've used their already award-winning gins, Wild Gin and O-Gin, done a special sort of adaptation to those, and then macerate that mulberries in there, and it turned out quite nice. It's also done in a sloe gin style, so it's not your traditional gin as you'd think, like your clear lemon and drug sort of gin. It's a fruit gin, or it's a take on a sloe gin. So it's a lower ABV. Generally, there's a lot of sweetness, and it's a more summertime sort of drink.
Yeah, right. That's and that's how I see it. The journey from the original tree, I love the story of the, it's 1860 or something, and the settlers all cut cuttings off it and took it back out into the community. You made the first few years of the batches from Kangaroo Island alone, didn't you? And ones even in the bushfires, I understand they did some interesting stuff with the locals to get access to mulberries. How does it all come together when they're in the early days making this gin? The best I can find out going through all our records and the old batch sheets, they started doing gin about 8 to 10 years ago, and they started doing really small batches, so using just between 5 and 10 kilos of fruit, which is pretty easy to find on the island, because as you mentioned, back in the day when they first planted it, the settlers would take cuttings from that tree, wander off to the other end of the island, settle there, and then plant that cutting, and eventually grows to a mulberry tree. So we can't actually take fruit from that original tree, but we can take fruit from all the offspring around the island. So then they'd get the fruit from those trees. But obviously you only need a little bit to start with. So that's how it started. And then as the popularity grew and grew and grew, you had to look elsewhere to get enough fruit to sustainably make it. Right. So how do you get enough fruit? So you make a lot now. I mean, last year we sold out in the peak season, and it's something that really comes to life in this summer season, because everybody likes to drink it as it comes up to Christmas. It's a great gift. And I know we got a couple of hundred bottles, and boom, they were gone in the first couple of weeks. Then we got a couple of hundred more, boom, they were gone. How did it get to this sort of, you're making 10,000 or more litres now, aren't you? And
Yeah,
it's
pretty
a
much.
phenomenon.
So originally, like I mentioned, the batches are between 30 and 50 litres. And they do a couple of those a season, which is sort of towards this time of year in spring, all the mulberries ripe, and that's when you get them all off the trees and you have to do it seasonally. So it was a seasonal release, and what you could make was what you could make, and you have to wait again until next year. But recently, or about a year ago, we started working with a guy in the Riverland called Peter Savo, and he has a mulberry farm at Kingston on the river, and he mass produces or grows heaps of mulberries, and he can harvest them with a machine. He used to be into viticulture and growing vines, so he's adapted that technology to make growing industrial amounts of mulberries basically. So we can't get enough from the island, so the next best thing is South Australia. So basically he'll harvest now 4.5 tonne of us every season, and then he snap freezes it, keeps in a freezer, and we order now to do a batch to make about 1,300 litres. We use about 640 odd kilos of fruit. So we get that shipped down, leaves Kingston in the morning, goes to an overnight freezer, gets dropped off at our freight company. They drive it down here. We meet them at the ferry at 6 o'clock at night, quickly unload it before it defrosts, and then scoot back to the distillery and chuck it in the gin. So it's a logistical race against time.
That's so good.
Yeah, but it's good. Yeah, we made some this week. I've got dirty hands, like stained purple.
My grandma would tell you need to use the green mulberries.
Yeah, well, turns out shaving foam works pretty well as well.
And she had powdered borax on me as well. We used to get scrubbed as children afterwards. Yeah. The most fabulous experience growing up with a big mulberry tree in your yard, I think, for everybody. Walk us through the distilling process. I can see you still behind you. I'd love everybody to hear about it.
Yeah, so up until very recently, everything was done in an 80 litre and a 300 litre still called Mavis and Mary. So Mary was the 300 litre, and that produced pretty much all the wild gin that was made up until maybe a month ago. And this one behind me in the corner, you can see the condenser here and the carter head here, which we use to put the botanicals in. And outer screen around the window is the actual pot of the still. And that's now 1,800 litres. So with 6 times the original capacity now, we can actually make it much more efficiently and effectively. But essentially we make our London Dry style gin, which is our wild gin, make a slight tweak to it, and then we basically get the fruit, the mulberries, and macerate it, soak it in the gin for up to at least 2 weeks, sometimes more. And that basically all the juices come out of the mulberry and mix with the gin, and you get our mulberry gin. And then essentially we put it drain all the gin out and the juice. It comes off pretty close to bottling strength, and then we take the mulberries, chuck them in a massive wine basket press with a hydraulic arm, and squeeze out every last drop of juice we can, and then filter it for pretty much a whole day to try and get rid of all the sediments. Obviously, being a natural product, there's lots of stuff in there, like vegetable, organic matter and sugars and stuff that will sediment out in a bottle if you don't filter out as much as you can. So after we've done the filtering, we then have to determine the alcoholic strength by distillation. So then we get that to the right strength by adding a bit of water or distilling some and adding back in the spirit and get it right, and then we bottle it, which is what we've been doing this week.
Must be a fun job. How do you describe the taste of it?
So typically when you think of a fruit gin or a sloe gin or something in this style, it's quite sweet, but ours is more savoury. So we don't add anything extra to it. It's just the gin and whatever sugars are in the mulberries. So there's a slight bit of sweetness there, but it's quite strong mulberry flavour with the gin sort of working in balance with it, and it's really quite unique. And a lot of people will try and meet and go, I thought it was going to be sweeter. I thought it was going to be more of a fruit juice sort of punch. But the beauty of having a more savoury fruit gin is that then it's really good in mixes where you can add sugar to it, or ginger beer, or throw it in all sorts of cocktails. So it's dealer's choice when it comes to enjoying it.
And you've got a tip for everybody today on the best way to drink it. I know we've got it on a recipe on the site. So what's your favourite way to drink mulberry gin?
So, aside from drinking it straight like all gin enthusiasts, do, I like to just add a bit of ginger beer, essentially, or anything like a bit of lemon cappy tonic or something like that with a bit of sugar and carbonation, and that makes it really enjoyable, especially on a hot day.
That's how I've drunk it, and I really love it with the ginger beer. I have to say, it is my favourite. Obviously, Kangaroo Island Spirits is, you have a whole range of other gins, but we'll talk about them on another video. There's a whole range within the group. What are the different products you do have?
So we've got our two flagship gins, essentially being a wild gin, which is our most popular, and it's a London dry style gin, so clear, slightly stronger in ABV than our mulberry gin, quite approachable, nice sweet gin. And then we have our O gin, which is made from Olyria axillaris, which is a coastal daisy bush on the island, and that's one of the main flavours in it. So again, the theme coming back to using what you can locally is one we're trying to stick with our products. So those are our two London dry style gins, and from them we have a series of barrel aged gins. So one being the whiskey barrel aged gin, which essentially if you have a combination of wild and O gin mixed together in a varying proportion, that goes into ex-Starwood whiskey barrels, and they sit there for 3 months and take on some of those characteristics. And it's designed to be more of a sipping gin rather than a mixer, and it's really nice. And we have our Old Tom, which is more of a throwback to the days of old in London in the 1800s when everyone was making heaps of gin, and they were doing it really cheaply, and they weren't doing their cuts right, and they got all sorts of bad alcohols and bad flavours and stuff that it wasn't good for you and making you blind and sick. So they used to hide that bad flavour with sugar and lemon myrtle and anise myrtle and other flavours to try and make it more palatable. So ours is like that, except it's with good alcohol. It's not going to make you sick unless you drink to excess.
That sounds great.
And Mulberry Gin's our fifth one, so and we've already talked through that one.
It's absolutely the best seller on Starts 60 Marketplace. So it's, and this time of the year is the time when everybody seems to love it because it does make a good gift for everybody. I'm really delighted to have had you with us today, Charlie, to share the Mulberry Gin story. I can say from personal experience, because I have my own bottle, that just how great it is. And I bought it for some of my relatives last year with dark plum colour. And it's bold, tart flavors. I think that's how we describe it here when we taste it out. So for me, this is available to purchase on the marketplace. So I encourage you all. The link will be above this video, so you can enjoy it online. And if you want to get it shipped before Christmas, now's the time. I think with Australia Post's hold-ups. So thank you so much for joining us today, Charlie. I really, really appreciate your time.
No worries, anytime.